Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof for the 25th of August 2024. If you ignore my breaking news piece about Pavel Durov being arrested, we'll give us a quick mention to that in the geopolitical section. Right, we'll start with military news, military aid and assistance news. Lithuania announces a new aid package for Ukraine. There's been lots of Lithuania, Latvia last 2 or 3 days. I'm probably repeating myself here, but by September, Vilnius will transfer short-range air defense systems, missiles, anti-drone and other equipment and ammunition. By the end of the autumn, Lithuania will also have handed over nearly 5,000 drones of its production to Ukraine. Country is also providing 35 million euros for Ukraine to purchase radars and demining equipment. So there's just a bit more of this information that's come through from what we've heard over the last couple of days. So Lithuania and Latvia as well, that we heard yesterday and the day before, doing a really good job to support Ukraine to the best of their capabilities. Now, Lithuania, as mentioned here, will hand over 5,000 drones and 10 short-range air defense systems to Ukraine by the end of autumn. I wonder what those air defense systems will be. In addition, as mentioned, the package will include anti-drone and other equipment as well as ammunition. So all of that really useful. Lithuanian government will also spend 0.25% of GDP on aid to Ukraine annually. So that is something that they have called on previously for all. I think the Estonians had a report that brought this out, came up with this idea that if everyone did that, then Ukraine wouldn't have a problem at all. They'd just be absolutely sorted. Well, it's really good that some nations are doing that. Zelensky has talked, as we've heard, about this new drone missile called the Paliantsia. He talked about that yesterday on Independence Day. According to him, the development of the missile took 1.5 years. And it is cheaper than its analogues. So Paliantsia can reach 24 Russian airfields. The Ukrainian missile is launched from a ground-based facility. And this is, I talked about this in one of my previous videos, but with the Americans putting restrictions on the use of Western equipment so that ATACMS and Storm Shadows can't be used into Russian territory to destroy those air bases, then it was incumbent upon the Ukrainians themselves to produce something that could. Here is a weapon that I don't know what the range is. There are some talks about 1,000 kilometers. I don't know what the warhead is. Classified, range classified, warhead classified, produced classified. We just know its name and what it looks like. But it essentially should be able to do the job of taking out targets at those airfields. What you really want are cluster munitions to take out airframes. But short of that, a missile drone slamming into some part of the airport airbase infrastructure is going to be pretty useful. The question will be, what is the scale of production for such a drone? And I don't know. It's lower cost, so that's really good. Increasing production is ongoing. The mission is to protect the civilian population. So you're going to be talking about taking out the enemy's offensive potential, that's what it says here, and hitting into Russian territories to take out those the capability of using guided glide bombs. Okay, Russia, so that's all we have for the Ukrainians. Russia is to modernize its Yak-52 trainers to shoot down Ukrainian kamikaze drones. That's something we've already heard previously. But yeah, it's going to include electronic warfare system and multifunctional displays that allow it to combat reconnaissance and attack drones. That is detailed in an article in The Aviationist. So if you want to get more detail on exactly how that is going to work, check that out. This is possibly a fairly decent, cheap-ish sort of way around the threat of reconnaissance drones and kamikaze drones. I would say for the Ukrainians, it's a problem of those medium-range reconnaissance drones. We're seeing lots of options here with drone-on-drone activity. We are seeing prop plane with someone with a shotgun at the back on drone activity. We are seeing helicopter on drone activity. So these threats are being adapted to. It's worth mentioning as well, I think I might have got rid of it because I was going to talk about it tomorrow, but Ukraine has actually come up with a drone method of operation, which is these are more like your FPV type drones, which is to follow, rather than take out a Russian drone, if it comes across it follows it back to where it goes. So it gets an idea of the setup of what's going on in the rear. And I guess you're also following the drone back to its operators if it's one that isn't a kamikaze drone. So following that back to its operator gives you a great sense of intelligence of what's going on, and then you can do counter strikes on the on the drone team. So yeah, quite a bit of a change there in the way they operate. Poland is to spend 3.3% of its GDP. Oh no, this is actually for that's come. Oh yeah, there it is. So that's. I'm sorry, I had that Russian yak one in the wrong place. So there is the. I was going to talk about that in greater depth tomorrow in my hits and losses because I think it's more relevant for that. But you can read what the change of approaches for the drone operators there, and then yeah, Poland is to spend 3.3% of its GDP on aid to Ukraine. In total, Warsaw provided the country with $26 billion. 3.3% of its GDP on aid to Ukraine. That's incredible. Surely that's not right, but evidently, well, in total, we have given Ukraine almost 1,000 pieces of heavy equipment: T-72 tanks, PT-91 Twadi, Leopard, various types of armored personnel carriers, 10 MiG-29 aircraft, 10 helicopters, and much more. The Polish president said 3.3% is what it's spending on defense in total. I wonder if yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's including all sorts of stuff like on the welfare state for, say, education for Ukrainian refugees and so on and so forth. So I don't know if that's being reported accurately. That sounds. I was just singing the praises of Lithuania spending 0.25% of GDP. 3.3% of GDP is what they're expected to be spending on defense alone in order to qualify for NATO. So if they're spending all of that just on Ukraine, yeah, I think that's slightly wrong. So anyway, I'd expect that to be corrected. Right, and I talked about this earlier. Batch of motorcycles for Banzai attacks in the SMO zone, says Dimitri from War Translated, to quote, help the guys in the current difficult situation. So these have all been donated by single person: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 20. There looks to be about 50 plus motorbikes there, maybe 60 motorbikes, probably about 60 motorbikes going to, even more actually, goodness me. So that's useful. Thanks to One Kind Man, it says there, for the Russians to get hold of all of that. Although sometimes you see sort of a list on Andrew Perpetua's lost list of like 12 motorbikes in a single day. So it could be that's like a week's worth of motorbikes. But, better to have those than not to have those, I would say. So I wonder if the Ukrainians have thought that motorbikes are useful for them. They're in defensive mode, so I doubt it. It's more likely that you'd use these to attack than to defend. So I don't think the Ukrainians would have so much need. Russians have announced a recruitment wave in Kursk for the local unit Bars Kursk. So Bars is your reserves unit, offering a 6-month contract, which we know means nothing, says War Translated. The requirements are quite trivial. Age of up to 65 years old and able to perform the tasks. That's very vague, isn't it? They promise a very high reimbursement, as usual. So expensive for the Russians to do that if they come true on their promises, but also very low threshold in order to get into those reserve units. And I think it's when you see stuff like this, it's like, is that what they'd do if they weren't desperate? Probably not. So any bit of information like that, any nugget concerning recruitment in such a way speaks to me of desperation. Right, Jacob says, while Russia fills the global information space with cries of free speech to spread disinformation into Western minds, Russians have just targeted a group of Western journalists with a missile strike. This is really significant. So Kramatorsk, a hotel in Kramatorsk, was targeted last night, in which Ukrainian and international journalists were staying. It's not the first time this has happened. There have been hotels, that hotel in Kharkiv about a year and a half ago, sometime ago, being targeted. This is not cool. Remember, the Reuters team covering the war in Ukraine was missing, and 2 others were hospitalized after a strike on a hotel in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk. What is the international community's reaction to this? Does this just go under the radar? There's no real reporting on this. Where's the absolute disgust in what Russia is doing here? And its attack on just freedom of speech and press, but also on international entities just doing their job. Now, Georgia has apparently gone all North Korea with a bombshell plan to ban the main opposition parties, according to Politico. This is incredibly worrying for Georgian democracy, and we'll have to see how this evolves. The EU ambitions face new blow as analysts warns the government's move would be the end of Georgia's democracy. Georgia's ruling party has vowed to outlaw virtually all of its political opponents if it wins parliamentary elections later this year. The ban would likely leave Georgia's already frozen bid to join the EU in tatters after recent clashes between Tbilisi and Brussels on human rights and the rule of law. On Friday, the Prime Minister Irakli Kobajice said the government would seek to ban more than half a dozen parties following October's critical nationwide vote. That comes days after the ruling Georgian Dream Party threatened to dissolve the largest opposition grouping in parliament, the United National Movement, UNM, that was founded by former Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili, who I think is in prison in hospital. And getting worse. In addition to the UNM, the other pro-Western factions with seats in parliament face being shuttered. Kobajice said, because, quote, in reality, all of these are one political force. Any MPs elected on their platforms, he said, would be barred from taking up office. I believe that abolishing parliamentary mandates will be the logical continuation of outlawing these parties. Criminal members of the criminal political forces shouldn't exercise the status such as that of a member of Georgia Parliament, he said. I mean, basically, yeah, this is your way to full-on autocracy and dictatorship, not necessarily under him, but under the shadowy chap. Is it? It's not Ivanishvili, is it? I think it is Ivanishvili, who is a guy that is the founder of Georgian Dream, who is basically your functional dictator there, I would argue. That's really worrying stuff, and I just hope that the people of Georgia rise up again like they did against the Foreign Agents Law and just get rid of the government in a kind of revolution, if you like. This was interesting. So the president of Poland was in Ukraine yesterday for Independence Day, and he gave this speech that ended, if it happens that Russia's forces are leaving Ukraine, I'll be the first to call Zelensky and ask him not to bomb them and just let them go home instead. Leave them be. Zelensky, right off the cuff, this is the comedian in him, and said, but what if my phone line's busy? In other words, yeah, we're probably just going to bomb the shit out of them type thing. Like, well, okay. And it was quite funny because he was like, it goes through a translator. He's speaking Polish and then Zelensky speaks in Ukrainian. He gets him to repeat it. And he's like, anyway, I thought that's quite amusing. Sabotage has been confirmed at a Norwegian airbase. A fibre optic cable has been cut there at the Norwegian airbase. That was announced amid fears of sabotage at military bases and concerning drone activity in Germany that I previously reported on. So, the Russians appear to be, or pro-Russian entities appear to be out in force around Europe doing what they do. Australia has issued a postage stamp in support of Ukraine. That's really cool. What on Australia? Flaming hoons. Bloody awesome, mate. Really, really appreciate the Aussies in the house here. Awesome. Thank you very much. And Ukraine will work on peace negotiations, but without Russia, according to Le Monde. Now it is my opportunity to speak in the French accent, if I may. How do you say? Both. That's my French. At the end of August, negotiations were indeed supposed to take place on a partial cessation of strikes on the energy infrastructure, but the attack on Kursk region disrupted everything. So, secret talks between Ukraine is going to be working on peace negotiations, but without Russia. Now, it's interesting that Zelensky's come out and said that the Kursk incursion is all about a political military. It's not just a military thing, it's a political military thing. So it appears that the whole Kursk incursion is to do with negotiations and exchange of territory and all sorts of stuff that we had been supposing from its start. Now, I've done a breaking news piece on this, so I won't go through all this. But just to let you know, if you haven't seen that, go and watch that. Pavel Durov, who is the Franco-Russian CEO of Telegram. Telegram's a social network platform, rather like WhatsApp Messenger Signal, but it's kind of Russian-owned, or it's Pavel Durov owned, and it appears to have massive connections to the Kremlin. And it could be that the Kremlin is getting lots of information because, an awful lot of users use it from Ukraine, and the Ukrainian military are not allowed to communicate on it using comms. They do have Telegram channels on it to release videos and stuff, but actual communication is a no-go for the Ukrainians. But the Russian army use this, and it's thought that his arrest, Durov's arrest, because he's not been working with moderators, he's essentially allowing the platform to be used by terrorists, narcotics, complicity, fraud, money laundering, receiving stolen goods, pedo-criminal content. In other words, human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking is able to happen on Telegram, and he doesn't do anything about it and is complicit in it type thing. So he's been arrested. And this could actually have a massive effect on the Russian war, because it's used as, in fact, some Russian sources have said this is the head of Russian intelligence, if you like, Pavel Durov, has been arrested. So wow, this could be massive, much bigger than you might think. So lots of Russians are panicking about this. They're going off on one. You got comments from Medvedev and Sladkov here, military blogger. So this is, as mentioned, a potentially really big thing. There's a massive thread on it that I shared with you. Also some stuff from Anton Gerashenko here talking about what the Russian reaction is and the cryptocurrency associated with it. TONTON cryptocurrency, which is used in Telegram, has fallen sharply, and there's potential effects there. And there's that really big thread from Yaroslav Azhniuk. Anyway, to move on from that, people are talking about how, as Jakub Janovsky from Oryx says, I think now would be a perfect time for Elon Musk to visit France. I wonder if he would ever hand over his controlling share of Twitter to the EU in exchange for not spending years in jail. So you're going to have lots of free speech advocates shout about this. People like Tucker Carlson, Andrew Tate, Elon Musk have already come out. So Elon Musk has come out, and two things he's already said. He's starting to have a public meltdown about what's happening with Telegram. As Dr. Ian Garner says, watching this dude have a total meltdown is the best Sunday entertainment you could wish for. Liberté, liberté, liberté. And that's been community noted itself. But he's getting worried because obviously he's in under a lot of pressure because he got rid of his moderation teams and is now allowing Twitter to be manipulated by Russia and be used for wide-scale disinformation. To the point that he's even saying things like this, Elon Musk: we're working on highlighting more banger content from currently small Twitter accounts. Our current algorithm shows too much from accounts that are big already. So you already know that he has himself artificially amplified by the Twitter code. People like David Sachs, pro-Russian sympathizer. You have all these ne'er-do-wells getting amplified by Elon Musk, and all those pro-Ukrainian channels are coded the same as disinformation by Twitter and therefore de-amplified. And then now he's saying we're going to change it so it's not just about these big Twitter handles, but we're going to amplify some smaller Twitter handles. Yeah, but you get to choose that, I assume. That's not just like natural algorithms let some small ones be randomly amplified. What's going to be the rationale between who gets amplified? Oh, look, it's people that think like you. Oh, and Twitter just becomes a big Elon Musk echo chamber. So, I'm no big fan of him, but I'm no big fan of him for really good bloody reasons. The guy and his... Twitter is amazing for what I do. I couldn't do what I do without Twitter, but there is a whole side of Twitter that is incredibly destructive and disruptive and problematic. And it's that side of Twitter that really needs to be sorted out, and he's just making it worse. The bots and trolls are on there. Just allow Russia to have a great purchase on our information systems, networks. Right. Spaces. Adam Kinzinger, Slavo-Ukraini. I love that he's still got that as his handle. Adam Kinzinger is a Republican who spoke at the Democratic National Convention and was very pro foreign policy and very pro the Harris ticket in terms of reclaiming some of these ideas of patriotism and national security, etc., etc. He said an important thread: something happened at the DNC that will be written about for years. Donald Trump has given up traditional Republican ground, and the Democrats and Kamala has snatched it up. Trump gave up being the defense candidate by becoming weak and panicked and embracing Russia. Kamala said she wants to make the most lethal military ever and stand up to dictators. She said that, and it was clear in her speech. And she raised her volume and the cadence to this very strong level. This is one of the best parts of her speech. But she was talking about the most lethal military ever. You know, that is not something you would normally hear from a Democrat. What they're trying to do is attract those Republicans and independents and swing voters across to the Democratic Party by sounding the klaxon, I guess, of traditional Republican topics. So Trump gave up being the proud American party. They hate America, which is obvious to all but the most loyal MAGA, says Adam Kinzinger. And Kamala showed her pride in the country as it is today, not pining for the 1950s, not going back. Trump gave up being the border hawk. While this will take time to recognise, I believe cracks have started. Kamala reminded everyone that Trump tanked the hawkish border bill and committed to signing it in front of a loudly cheering crowd. So this was the most conservative border bill that would ever have been signed by agreed upon in a bipartisan way, and that got tanked because Trump didn't want to solve the border because he wanted it to be an issue so he could campaign on it. And she's openly said, we will sign that if you vote us in. We will get that signed. That is something that I will campaign on. So that's interesting. Trump ceded the ground on opportunity and vision. His constant whining and focus on the past. Kamala showed a forward-looking vision. Trump gave up on law and order, not just January the 6th, but attacking the FBI, questioning the CIA and calling for violence. And now an award ceremony for the January the 6th criminals, which he's called for. He's going to not only pardon them, but give them awards. And have you seen the videos of the stuff they did at the Capitol? Wow. Kamala showed appreciation for police and stressed her role as a prosecutor. And the Dems are now on their way to being the patriotic, USA chanting, America loving party, and the Republicans look like the bitter old men who are angry the country is vibrant and dynamic. What a flipping record time. A bad plan to keep the GOP relevant. Now, just going back to the beginning, this is all relevant because if Harris and the Democrats continue with their surge in the polls, then they are looking to be the favourites to get elected in November. There's a long time still till then. There's a debate to be had. But if they're strong on national defence, they're strong on foreign policy, then this puts you. Certainly, she was very vocal about supporting Ukraine, and many of the speakers were, including Kinzinger himself, during the DNC, in a way that it was absent from the RNC. Ukraine is either not mentioned at all or mentioned in very negative ways. And indeed, here's an example. So this is Tim Pool. Tim Pool is one of your biggest Republican vloggers, a bit like Joe Rogan is as a podcaster. Tim Pool is your YouTuber that's trying to be Joe Rogan. And as Joshua Reed Equal here says, please tell me the difference between this and Russian state television. Tim's wincing and banging the table over how evil Ukraine is, just like his favourite Russian propagandists overseas. This is absolutely disgusting.
They know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. They are expanding.
I'm not a violent person, but if I could punch someone across the internet, I would. Right in the face.
This war. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do. Ukraine is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, triggering this conflict.
It did not trigger this conflict. The conflict had been going on before that. That happened well after February 2022. And indeed, the conflict started in 2013-14. Tim Pool, you don't know what you're talking about.
Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
We should apologize to Russia. Holy. Oh my God. This, of all the things that have been said in the last 2.5 years, this one, I think gets me the most. I can't believe you, mate, need to go to Ukraine and see it for yourself. You, mate, need to be educated, freaking educated. That is disgusting that you want to apologise to now an indicted war criminal that is committing genocide in Ukraine and whose national propagandists on state television are spreading genocidal rhetoric on a nightly basis. And you want us to apologise to them? You want us to apologise to them for trying to do something about Bucha? Are you freaking serious?
Rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
I hope that you lose all your subscribers and supporters, you absolute dingbat. And that is way too polite for what I really think about you, Tim Pool. My goodness, you need an education. You need a geopolitical education. You are so deep in it, my friend. And by friend, I mean... you are so deep in it that you cannot see. Your eyes are just covered. You can't see through the manure, the informational manure that you have been submerged in for far, far too long. Oh my goodness. Right, and talking about this kind of thinking, we've still got more on JFK Jr. here, who's dropped out. He's endorsed Trump. He's not running for president anymore. And he's doing both because RFK Jr. and Trump work for the Russians. The clown is saying that Putin winning an election with 88% of the vote after banning all opposition candidates from appearing on a ballot is legitimate and is actually democracy in America that does not really exist because the DNC, a completely private organization, would not let JFK run as a Democrat. This man and all the fools who have promoted him the last 2 years have done some serious damage to our democracy. This is some pretty incredible rhetoric.
President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television...
You're not prevented from appearing on a ballot for the country as you're doing right now, and you've given up doing yourself. You can appear on a ballot. You can't say, I'm going to be the guy representing the Democratic Party when the Democratic Party are going, no, you're not. No, you're not. That's like Trump saying, I'm going to run for the Democrats this year. And the Democrats going, no, you're not. You can't do that. It's our party. We don't want you to do that. You ain't doing that. We've got our guy, thank you very much, or our woman. It's just, what a numbnut.
Networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. President Biden...
There's only one organ around here, my friend. And I'm looking at him. Right, says Chris P. The West is to blame for the suffering in Ukraine. This is again RFK Jr. Ukraine has lost 600,000 young people. Russia has lost 100,000 young people. Where are you getting those figures from, mate? The US has lost $200 billion. Where are you getting those figures from, mate? And Europe has lost its industrial base. Where are you getting that idea from, mate? It's ramping it up. Literally ramping it up. Do you know what? I totally disagree, Chris, by the way. What an effing delusional loser of a lying propagandist. 100%. Like, that is Russian propaganda 101 in each of those instances, from Tim Pool to RFK Jr. on multiple occasions. Oh my goodness. And just to remind you who RFK Jr. has been hanging out with, serial child rapist Scott Ritter, not serial, but convicted is what I meant, sorry. RFK Jr. proudly gets burgers and takes selfies with convicted child sex offender and Russian propagandist Scott Ritter. Trump proudly accepts endorsement from RFK Jr. A 2-year-old could connect those dots. These guys don't even try to hide the fact they all work for Russia, says Jake Bro, and I don't disagree, dude. Right, Daniel Fried here says, have heard from insiders. Right, this is talking about, if you remember, yesterday I reported that the Americans said they are not wanting to lift restrictions on the use of US missiles deep into Russia for fear of upsetting the apple cart with regard to resetting and normalizing relations with Russia post-war. And then lots of people come out and said, and that was like an unnamed source in Politico. And a bunch of people have come out since then and said, that's just BS. That's not what we're thinking. No one believes that. So Daniel Fried, for example, says, have heard from insiders that the sentence at the end of that article, that Politico article, which talked about that, is completely untrue. I suspect as much. Nobody I speak to in the administration is interested in a reset with Putin's Russia. The last sentence of this article, that administration officials have told the Ukrainians that the US will eventually want to reset relations with Russia and thus limit support for Ukraine, is as jarring as it is unfortunate. Suspected it is inaccurate, is what Daniel Fried originally said, then went away and spoke to people and they're like, yeah, a load of BS. So it did seem a little bit incongruous. I think the rhetoric, despite anti-escalation, I think the rhetoric has been fairly consistent that Russia are the bad guys and they're done. I mean, they're done for the time being. There's no way back for Russia in the foreseeable future unless there's a complete reset of Russia, right? A regime change, the whole political upheaval. But as it stands, Russia are the pariah nation and are likely to be for some time to come. And the only way back for Russia would be for the Republicans to come in and lift the sanctions and have people like Trump and RFK Jr. and Tim Pool going, hey, yeah, we need to apologize to Russia because, hey, we were the bad guys. It was America that were the bad guys. Like, dude, I thought you're supposed to love America. I thought you're supposed to be USA, USA, USA. Like, what is going on? Anyway, I won't rant anymore because, my goodness, I could rant for a long time on that topic. And Tim Pool...